Let's get hyped. Welcome back to the Nebraska football regular season after a 1 week hiatus for the bye week. I am Mike Schaefer, joined by Michael Bruns, Brian Christopherson. We are Husker247. And this week on the Husker247 HypeCast, our special guest from ESPN.com, Max Olson, joins us. He is known as the transfer portal king in some circles. Because he has been covering the transfer portal for roughly as long as it has existed. And who better to have on for an Indiana game that features several intriguing transfer portal additions that are playing at a high level than Max Olson. Max, welcome back to the podcast. We were trying to figure out when we last had you on, and you were thinking it was like 2021 Oklahoma. Very different times for Nebraska football.
Yeah, I feel like and then I think the oddly specific prediction, didn't it involve like DJ Graham getting an interception? Then he had like the craziest interception of all time. One of you guys had that, I feel like.
I don't remember that. I think if you would have went with a blocked PAT return for points, that would have been a fantastic, oddly specific prediction. Or that Gabe Ervin's career would have just sort of ended roughly in that game. That too. Those are the things I remember from Nebraska, Oklahoma, including that DJ Graham interception. Bruns BC, welcome back. Did you enjoy the off week from having to make oddly specific predictions? Or Bruns, did you find yourself trying to make them when you were at the pumpkin patch this weekend?
I did. I made several for the Colorado K-State game just to try to stay sharp. So
okay. Any hit?
No. I had my oddly specific prediction was that DeAndre Jordan was going to be on the sidelines, and that was the only one that hit. There was a couple others that missed. So
I feel like you had some inside info on that one.
Yeah,
it was Durant, Westbrook. It was a pretty strong showing.
Yeah, Max Olson was there. Max Olson was there as well. Yeah. You would. Before we get going, I have one thing on that game. Were they trying to keep K-State from celebrating touchdowns in that game? I have never in my life seen an official go over to a player after they crossed the goal line as quickly as they were in that game. It was like a land speed record.
And, the K-State guys clearly had plans. Avery Johnson did the Dion shuffle in the end zone after his first touchdown. I think I did see some watch pointing, I think, after one of the sacks. So the K-State guys came prepared, and the refs came prepared for anything that might be mildly offensive to the Buffs, I guess.
Is this just like what happens when they can no longer police horns down in the Big 12 anymore? They have to find something else to be irrationally annoyed by as it relates to players on the field?
Yeah, Colorado is you guys have seen TV ratings, right? Colorado's the biggest brand in the conference now. I mean, you gotta defend their honor.
Amazing. All right, let's dive into what is a pretty big football game that I don't think any of the four of us thought would get as much coverage or be a big noon kickoff game on Fox here this Saturday with Nebraska and undefeated Indiana. And we will start with our first question. We're going to start on offense for Nebraska. We will start with our first question with Max Olson. Max, obviously I mentioned earlier, you do a lot with the transfer portal. Which of Nebraska's kind of transfer additions on offense have kind of stood out to you so far here in the 2024 season?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously you got to start at wide receiver, and I think that was such a critical position to find players that could make you better. And I think their ability to go out and beat some Big Ten teams on Jamal Banks was obviously extremely important. Talking to people around the program in the preseason, the expectation was, look, he's not the fastest receiver in the conference by any means, but he's really reliable and a guy that's going to help Dylan Raiola a ton. And I think we've certainly seen that in terms of how reliable he's been on his targets. Isaiah Nayer's, one of those players that when he went in the portal a couple of years ago, leaving Wyoming, was viewed as one of the best wideouts in the country, like a guy that Tennessee took and Texas took. You felt like if he had been able to stay healthy, he would have been a big household name. And so I think that was a great find to be able to take him from a Texas receiver room that's extremely crowded and full of blue chip guys. Man, what a great addition he's been. Again, just giving a freshman quarterback a lot more confidence and certainly compared to last year's stats, making this passing attack a lot more explosive.
Brian, it was the first collegiate bye week of Dylan Raiola's career. How did Nebraska go about trying to utilize that after the first 6 weeks of his season? He's got another 3 games here before the next bye week. And how did Nebraska try to utilize that bye week?
As a team, it seems like they got after it pretty good. Like, just real quick, I mean, Ty Robinson mentioned he thought maybe the veterans would kind of, I think, have a few days off, and maybe they had one. But by the end of it, before they set off Friday through Sunday, it was the top defense against the scout team hitting hard. So I sense it was the same, whichever position group, or if we're talking about Dylan, I think it was very much all business through Thursday last week. It seems like he did a good job brushing off his toughest performance so far against Rutgers. But he had an interesting quote the other day. That one stung him a bit. Like he was really disappointed that they didn't hit their standard in the second half of that game. And he had a line about how it felt like the end of the season, for a bit. But then the good part is, okay, we got 6 more games, so you get to go fix it. So I don't know. I just like that mindset where it means that much to him. You can tell, he's sometimes probably ultra hard on himself. And Marcus Satterfield said that's one thing he's growing at, is he doesn't have to put all the responsibility on his shoulders when it doesn't go well for the offense, because it's not all on his shoulders. But I think guys around him really respect that when they hear that, type of talk from the quarterback, who's a true freshman, and he carries so much responsibility, but he also is like one of the first guys in the office, during the bye week. So it impresses even the 6th-year guys.
Brunts, we know Nebraska wants to create more explosive plays on offense. Do you think they will have an easier time pulling that together over the final 6 weeks through the passing game, or can they unleash a little bit more in their running game than we've seen so far this year?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of playing law of averages. I think it's got to be through the passing game. I mean, the types of run defenses that Nebraska is going to face over its last 6 are not generally the kind that are going to get gashed with frequencies. So it feels to me a little bit like if that were going to happen and you're going to have guys, breaking 80-yard runs, that it would have already happened by now. So I think it's got to come through the passing game. I mean, some of those long passes to Nair that have been flagged for defensive pass interference need to start to be completed. They need to start to find catch and run opportunities for Nair and Barney, and maybe even, some 50-50 balls to Banks. I mean, I just think it's going to have to be through the air. That's not ideal, given weather the way it is in this part of the country and everything else. But I don't know what that next level is right now for Nebraska's running game. I mean, I think you kind of have to get the 2-yard runs to like 6 and 7-yard runs before you start thinking about breaking anything longer than 40 yards. So it's got to be through the passing game in my mind.
Sticking with Brunts here, do you anticipate any changes up front on the offensive line? In particular, where are we at with the Micah Mazuka saga here in week 5?
I think status quo on the saga. I don't know that there's a lot that's probably changed barring injury. I mean, the thing I'm eager to kind of see, though, is whether Nebraska in its running game chooses to go back a little bit more frequently to having Mazuka as the extra tight end, or a little bit more Barrett Liebentritt, who spoke on Tuesday after practice. I think there's some things that Nebraska can do there, especially against teams that don't practice frequently against the power run, that can be a little bit of a change up and maybe kind of give teams a different look than what they're used to seeing in an opponent's run game. So I think that's probably more of the direction it's headed. I do think I did like what they did with Mazuka against Rutgers, but maybe finding a little bit more of that in the playbook would be a good thing over these last 6 games here.
Max, what do we know about Indiana's defense through their first 6 games this season? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like they were at the bottom of the stop rate list that you put out about 10 days or so ago. They've had some success against different opponents, maybe not the best opponents, but they certainly seem to be playing at a high level. It's not just the offense for Indiana that's done well for the Hoosiers.
Yeah, certainly. So the stop rate update this week: Nebraska is 6th in the country at just under 80%. Indiana currently 16th at 72%. I think you look at Indiana, and the thing that stands out obviously is just how many guys they brought from James Madison who were starting. They have some really talented linebackers. They've got Mikhail Kamara has been one of the more disruptive defensive linemen in the Big Ten this season in terms of pressures and TFLs. D'Angelo Pons is a little bit undersized, but is a really good corner they brought from JMU, who's a freshman All-American. So I think that piece is certainly upgraded them a ton from a team that was 3-9 a year ago. And so I think the leadership, the experience there, I think that helps a ton. And, to me, guys, the thing that is surprising about Indiana, and we can talk about the roster rebuild and what they did, it was very ambitious, but for going from 3-9 to 6-0, you might say, okay, well, they're probably just winning a bunch of close games, right? Like, no, they're outscoring their opponents by 196 points this season. So you can question the strength of schedule, no doubt. You can definitely question how good are these opponents they're playing, but man, it's been pretty consistently dominant for them on both sides of the ball.
BC, I know we got into this a little bit on the Tuesday podcast, but I want to give you a chance to kind of reiterate what you sort of said there. Who stands out for you on offense as guys that you'd like to see more of here in the final 6 weeks of the season, or maybe even not necessarily more of, but an enhanced role even as Nebraska looks to finish out this year?
Yeah, I mean, Thomas Fidoni's who you maybe think of first. There's been spots like it was like the second quarter at Purdue where he kind of popped up for about 2 or 3 catches in a very short time span. And I could see, especially as much as when Rule talks about like the challenge of like spreading the ball out, he always kind of mentions Fidoni as a guy he pushes for a little bit, I think. So coming out of the bye, it wouldn't surprise me if there was a little bit of a concerted effort to get him involved, although this is all kind of progression based by what Dylan sees, and it's kind of how he works through the routes and if he finds certain guys. So that's a big part of it. But Fidoni's one. And then, I mentioned it earlier, but Jalen Lloyd, I think it doesn't have to be, 3 or 4 catches a game, but I could see in a contest like Saturday, he pops up with that 55-yard play, that Nebraska needs. I think he's got 1 or 2 of those in his bag down the stretch of the season if everybody's healthy. So he would be someone I'd mention there.
Shift over to defense and special teams. And normally we wait until the final question to ask about special teams, but we're going to get it out of the way right away. And we're going to go back to Brian Christopherson, our special teams analyst, since I seem to always give these to him every week. I know he's excited about it. Brian Buschini picked up a black shirt. What else did we learn about the special teams over the bye week coming off of uneven would be a kind way to put it, the first 6 weeks of the season?
Yeah, I think probably the most interesting thing to watch Saturday is if you're into the nerd stuff about who the personnel is that's out there at certain spots that we don't highlight as much, like maybe where that shifted a little bit, because Rule did mention that they played some younger guys in certain spots and maybe there was some analysis there of other guys who could be on the field. So I wonder if we'll see a few different things, maybe in the punt block about who's out there. Although some of this comes down to some of your best players doing what they can do or know they can do. And like, Gifford, who we all respect a lot, missed a block on one of them against Rutgers that caused the first punt block. So you've got to have everybody just dialed in, and there might be some changes there. I think, of course, the Alvano thing's going to be interesting through the week if he makes a travel roster and or if he's close to coming back. I don't know. He at least was kicking earlier this week. So whatever his timetable is, we'll be tracking. And also if Nebraska's willing on a 4th and 4, on Indiana's 22-yard line in the early second quarter, are you going for that? Or are you going to give your guy that shot and see where it's at? If if you're going to see where it's at, I'd rather see it. We've talked about this too. Let's see where it's at in the late first quarter, mid second quarter, as opposed to late third or fourth quarter. So if you're going to take that field goal opportunity, I think a lot of people would rather see it come early than late and see how it goes.
Max, Curtis Rourke has become one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten. In a year where you have a lot of transfer quarterbacks, you could argue he's had as big of an impact as Dylan Gabriel and Will Howard for their teams as well with what he's done at Indiana. What stands out to you about how he has played, and what should Nebraska fans know about the quarterback standing across from the black shirts on Saturday?
It was a really busy offseason transfer cycle in terms of, big name veteran quarterbacks that hit the market. And I think Curtis Rourke got overshadowed by a ton of guys. When you talk to Curt Cignetti, this is a guy that is a 6th-year senior who's roughly our age. And he came in with, close to 1,000 career pass attempts. I think that was the big appeal to Curt Cignetti, who had a good quarterback at James Madison in Jordan McLeod, who's now at Texas State. This is just a veteran guy who I think they really like the makeup and the way he goes about it. Somebody who probably could have gone pro. Don't know that he would have been drafted, but was thinking about going pro at that point in his career, and was a Frank Solich recruit back in the day, and now he's at Indiana. And it's funny, like he finished 5th in our staff Heisman vote this week, and then you kind of go through. He doesn't have a Heisman moment this season. There's not one play where you're like, wow, Curtis Rourke did that. Partly because they have not played from behind on a single snap this season. So there hasn't been a lot of pressure moments for Indiana, but he's been one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the country. I think he leads all Power 4 starters in terms of QBR. I think that they did a really good job of adding a ton of new players at wide receiver and at running back, have a pretty solid offensive line. And so it's all fit together extremely well for the Hoosiers. And, I think when the last game against Northwestern, they got into a 3-point game in the fourth quarter, and he responded with 2 touchdown drives and put that game away. So they've done a very good job of just kind of staying out of trouble.
Brunt, as you size up Indiana, where do you see the biggest challenge for Nebraska's defense in what the Hoosiers want to do and what Nebraska ultimately wants to do to teams?
Yeah, it's a tough offense to game plan for because they throw the ball really well. They're extremely efficient. They are able to run the ball really well. They when they even fake the run, it's really hard run fakes, and they put your linebackers in particularly difficult situations to defend. And, I think Nebraska has the personnel to handle whatever Indiana's going to throw at them. It feels like it's going to be a big game for Javen Wright, but I do think this is kind of a unique offense in that, you prepare for Rutgers. You knew you were basically going to have to try to shut down Monongai as much as you could. Purdue, you kind of knew what you had to go in and do. Same with Colorado. But Nebraska hasn't really faced this kind of a balanced offense that's so multiple yet. And, as Max said, has scored against everybody. I mean, you can certainly quibble about level of competition and who they've played so far, but, the numbers are the numbers. And, there's still defensive football players with helmets and jerseys and everything on the other side of that line of scrimmage. And they've been able to do pretty well. So I think that's just the challenge for Nebraska is what do you try to limit? And, to me, it seems like a game where you're really going to need your defensive front to win without having to dedicate a bunch of extra guys to bring pressure. So, just kind of the multiple things that they can do and as well as they do it, I think that's really the challenge.
You talked about the defensive front. What have you seen from Nebraska's pass rush in 2024 relative to what we saw in 2023, where several guys kind of broke out, and now the expectation is Nebraska should be able to get after the passer?
Yeah, I mean that the 4-man pass rush, we wrote a lot about that in the preseason. Certainly in the non-conference schedule, it showed itself, and it's just this question of can you have 4 guys, beat their guys and get pressure up front. And I think Nebraska can cover well. And if it's almost kind of like mental warfare in some ways. If you're just getting beat up front by 4 guys, and you've got Ty Robinson, getting after guys in the pass rush, I still don't think we've seen the best from Jamari Butler yet. Cam Linhart's had a pretty quiet sophomore campaign so far, but Nebraska has guys that I think most weeks can be a problem for opposing offensive lines in this conference. So, when you kind of talk about, having to take something away, if you are just wrecking shop up front, that makes your job as a defensive play caller that much more easy, and really kind of frees up lanes too if you want to get exotic and bring an extra rusher or two. So that's the key in my mind. I think Nebraska has shown that they can do it. I think the emergence the last couple of games of James Williams has been a nice addition there as well, as a guy that can just pin his ears back and go. So I think they have the ability to do it. The last 6 games, though, you're going to be facing a little bit better offensive lines that you're going to have to do it against.
Max, we spend a lot of time talking about the opponents and what they might be able to do to Nebraska's defense. You've put more eyes on both of these teams than anybody else in this podcast. In what ways can Nebraska's defense challenge Indiana that maybe they haven't faced much of this season?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I just think probably the quality of Big Ten opponent they've seen so far is not great. I mean, they're teams that certainly offensively are not really scaring anybody else in the conference. And so I think in some ways, and both teams are aided by coming off a bye week and having a lot of extra time to prepare for this one. But I think I'll be interested to see how can Nebraska's defense challenge. I think the wide receiver DB challenge will be interesting in this game, because I think that Indiana offensively, Elijah Surratt's really good. They brought him from James Madison. They brought in some good talent, Miles Price, Miles Cross. Those guys can go, and so can Tommi Hill and the DBs handle that? And I think that there's that same challenge on the flip side there too. Can Indiana's DBs handle all the ways that Nebraska can attack you, and the way they can get Ja'Cory Barney the ball in space? I think that piece of the game, as much as it's a Big Ten game and it's gonna be one up front, I think that the talent and the new talent on both sides there, it's a real prove it game in terms of can you make big plays in a tense game.
BT, how much of a lift would it be for Nebraska if they have a healthy Tommi Hill coming out to Bloomington on Saturday and coming back to that cornerback spot?
It definitely helps to have the versatility there, because you can use all those guys against this type of offense. I get a little bit more nervous probably than some people about there's sometimes this, like, it's a video game idea, like a guy who's been on the shelf for like 3 or 4 weeks. I'm always worried, like, okay, you got to jump right back in against a team that's top 5 right now in scoring offense and yardage and all that stuff. It's not an easy assignment. So I'm as curious as anybody how that will go. It sounds like he's trending toward being available, but we've kind of heard that the last week or two. So I think it's going to go right up to the game again. Obviously, a lot has been documented about Sierra Wright, and that's been, I think, one of the most encouraging parts of the Husker first half of the season, is just how comfortable you feel about him already going into a game like this. So that helps. But yeah, Max laid it out well. This is a different type of challenge for those guys in the secondary, but you've got veteran dudes. You've got Hartzog, Buford, Singleton. They've all played a lot of football. This is a type of game where you have to shine and rely on your experience and believing in what you can do out there, and not get caught up in all the extra sauce, that's involved with this one.
Prediction time. All right, let's get some oddly specific predictions on the table. I will go ahead and start to give you a little extra time to let yours marinate. I'm going to go with Nebraska will score on its opening drive. They will go at least 72 yards, and they will cap it off with a touchdown on a play action pass inside the 7-yard line. We'll say 5 yards. 5-yard play action pass. Dylan Raiola finds Jamal Banks back of the end zone Nebraska puts Indiana behind for the first time this season? Michael Bruns.
I think if Nebraska is going to come out victorious in this game, I think they're going to need some kind of non-offensive score. I don't think that I can reliably say that the special teams is going to provide that right now. Well, I mean, Bushini's got a cannon, so I mean, he might have something there. But I believe that Nebraska will score a defensive touchdown in this game. I think it's going to be Javen Wright. I think he's going to step in front of a pass that it's, maybe on a drag route or something like that over the middle where you feel like you got a lot of space in front of you. They don't see him. He picks it off and runs it back 27 yards for a touchdown. I don't know when it happens, maybe early second quarter. But I think Nebraska is going to need a defensive touchdown in this game. So it's going to be a big one for Wright.
Max.
I'm going to say Nebraska does not miss a field goal against Indiana and does not attempt a field goal against Indiana.
Okay.
Multiple attempts on fourth down to avoid trying to kick a field goal on the road. That's a scary proposition right now. So I think that if they get in some field goal range and it's not a crazy distance, I think probably got to go for it this week.
Do you want to put a number on how many attempts?
Oh, fourth down attempts?
Yeah.
3.
Okay. BC.
Nebraska's going to block a punt. It's going to go forward. It's going to go out of bounds forward for like an 11-yard net at the 38. And it's going to be
how far is the ref going to come to mark it off when he doesn't know where it actually is, though?
Yeah, it's going to be give or take 5 yards on either side. He's not going to be real sure of where to put the foot down, but he's going to say the 30. He's going to say the 38 because he doesn't want to go round number 40 and be like obvious that he doesn't know. So it's kind of he's a savvy ref. So an 11-yard punt. And then it's going to be kind of a hard-fought drive to determine if Nebraska makes it pay off. And it's come down to a 4th and goal at the 1 again, like plunge situation. They're going to go with Dowdell, heavy set. It's going to look like he gets stopped, but he's going to kind of get it just over. Maybe it has to go to review for a touchdown. That's a sequence that'll play out in the second quarter, I believe.
And then the review will take 3 minutes and 50 seconds at least.
Yep. It's the Big Ten. It's going to review. There's no question.
Yeah.
That's not even an oddly specific prediction. That's going to review. All right, BC, your pick to click.
Pick to click is Isaiah Nair. I think this is a game where as much as Nebraska's guys in the trenches are going to keep them in it, like on the defensive side, Ty and Nash causing havoc, I think they do have to have that special play from their skill guys where Nair just goes up and on a 50-50 ball, this time it's his. He takes one away maybe for a touchdown, something like that. He just has big play capabilities, and I feel like he busts out a couple in this game.
Max.
Come back to me.
Okay. Brunt.
He's not going to have a ton of catches, but Nebraska's going to find 2 or 3 really nice plays where Jalen Lloyd is going to get open for long gains. That's what's been missing in this offense a little bit is finding him, getting using that speed to get behind the defense. So I think he's going to finish 2 or 3 catches. If the over-under was 2.5, I think that would be a pretty fair line. But he's going to finish with 67 yards receiving. I'm going to go oddly specific on this as well. So 2 or 3 long catches for Lloyd for 67 yards.
Okay. I'm going to go John Bullock, who looked at the CBS midseason All-American team and noticed that his name was not on there, but rather a linebacker with no sacks, forced fumbles, interceptions, or pass breakups was chosen to represent the midseason All-American team. You look at John Bullock has lots of those. That linebacker resides in Oklahoma. I'm pretty sure he's just there because of his name alone. Great player. You kind of need to see more than one hurry on the season to make a midseason All-American team. That's just me. John Bullock has a big statistical day against Indiana. They need him in the middle. He's going to be involved, whether it's against the run or against the pass. He's Nebraska's flash player this year on defense, and I think he does it again. Max, who you got?
I'm going to go on the Indiana side. I'm going to go Miles Price in the slot at receiver. This is a Texas Tech transfer. This is a receiver group that they hit on enough guys out of the portal that Donovan McCulley, who is their returning number one receiver, decided to redshirt and quit this team after 4 games because he was not playing enough behind the guys they brought in. So, I think Miles Price is a guy that is going to be, when you've got Surratt outside, when you've got Omar Cooper and Miles Cross, like I think that this is just going to create some matchup challenges, and they use Zach Horton at tight end as well. So I think Price in the slot is a little bit of a problem, and one that I could see him getting a bunch of targets, and you got to find someone who can cover him up.
All right, this is going to be fascinating. I think we're going to have some different answers here. It is score prediction time. I need your score prediction. Nebraska at Indiana. Michael Bruns, you have the honors.
Yeah, so I think going back, I had Nebraska at 6-1 going into Columbus. In spite of statistical data, I will continue with that. And I think Nebraska finds a way to get it done against Indiana. It's going to be a really tight game. I think Nebraska wins 28-25. Defense is going to have to make some stops late. And I'll go with Max. I don't see Nebraska kicking a field goal in this game. So 28-25 Nebraska.
All right. Max, keep in mind, you have no field goals for Nebraska as you make the score prediction here.
Oh, absolutely. I felt very strongly ahead of the Colorado game that as good as Tony White is, as good as this defense is, that Nebraska's offense would need to score 30 points to win that game. I was wrong about that. Obviously, they only, what did they need? 11 points to win that game. So I misfired on that. I think that might be true of this week. Obviously Indiana scoring 45 points a game. So that's not a stretch. I think it'll be closer to that. I don't think it's going to be a Rutgers kind of game. I think there's going to be points. I'm going to go Nebraska. I'm going to say 28-21.
Okay. I really appreciate the first 2 people giving scores grimaced as they had they don't really believe in their pick, or they're just not quite sure on this date that they believe in their pick.
I had 28-24, and then he said 28-25. So I got to pick something different. Yeah.
All right.
Price is right to you. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
All right, BC, are you going to join the Nebraska party, or are you going to be on the dissenting side?
What are you, a hater?
Yeah.
He's got the candy stripes on. Look at him.
This is one of those, I'll be honest, I feel like sometimes it can end up where 4 people pick the same, but it's more of a 2-2 split game.
Yeah.
And so I was sort of going to go with the opposite of what Bruns or Max picked to even it out, to represent. That's how I feel about this game. I definitely can see Nebraska winning it. I think Indiana's good. I think they're not, I don't know if they're really good. I think they're good. And I think it's going to be a tough environment. And I'll give Nebraska the chance to just prove that they can go take out 2 big, terrible TV graphics with 1 big swing. The top 25 thing that stretches to 2016, the bull drought that stretches to 2016, and prove this score wrong. I'll say Indiana 27, Nebraska 24. But that would have been Nebraska 27, Indiana 24 had Bruns picked differently or Max picked differently, maybe.
Yeah, I think
I'll be honest.
Consternation. I understand the consternation. I'm going to go with, and very similar scores for all of us. I'm going to go with Nebraska 27, Indiana 23. I think this is a close game. I think Nebraska's ability to have grinded out the Purdue second half and the Rutgers game in its entirety helps them hold on late against Indiana. But if the score was reversed, it wouldn't surprise me. It feels like a true in my mind, kind of 50-50 game. But I'm going to go with a Nebraska win here, getting it done on the road. I think there's more pressure on Indiana. And I kind of like where Matt Rule's at in this spot. I think he can have them motivated. I think he can kind of do the nobody believes in us thing. And I expect Nebraska to come out and play hard, play physical in a way that maybe Indiana hasn't seen this year, and maybe catch them on their heels early in the game and then hold on late.
Mike, are you saying 2 field goals or 1 missed extra point?
I would like the viewers to find out on Saturday. That's how I feel about it. But I don't believe in 2 field goals, so it's definitely a missed extra point, or Nebraska goes for 2 because something weird happens. I don't know. We'll let that just play out as it does. But I just didn't want to say 28 like 2 other people did. So.
I will say, if Nebraska wins this game, I think next week you guys should, on the show, do like a fantasy draft of bowl destinations, because it's just been so long.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very good idea, and that will be filed away. Where we know Bruntz's last pick, he would probably choose to stay.
We know
home.
we know who the Mr. Irrelevant
bowl
Bowl
over
is.
The pinstripe.
Yep. Send me to Detroit. Send me to Siberia before we go to New York for the Pinstripe Bowl. That's the pick.
Is Detroit still the Little Caesars Bowl? Because you would probably put that high if it was still sponsored by Little Caesars.
Yeah, I mean, just aside from it not being New York, the potential for a lot of $5 hot and readies is it's high.
That has to be the media meal, right? You get the $5 hot and ready and the garlic knots. Like, that's just what they're going to give you. Everybody gets one.
Yep.
Whether you want
no,
it or
it's
not.
it's like the Cheez-Its Bowl. It's just like 90 pounds of Cheez-Its everywhere. That's what you get.
Just like we know you're number one. That's Nebraska could be a chance to play in the college football playoff, and Bruntz would rather see them in the Cheez-Its Bowl. There's little question about that. Max, we appreciate you joining us here on the Husker247 HypeCast. Everybody can check out your work at ESPN.com. Great stuff there. Everyone can check out the work of Michael Bruntz, Brian Christopherson, and myself at Husker247.com. We invite you to see what we have going on ahead of this Indiana game, and, of course, all of the coverage coming out of that as well. So, for Max Olson, Michael Bruntz, Brian Christopherson, I'm Mike Schaefer. We'll catch you next time.